Greetings, this is Cliff Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, covering Isaac Asimov's next story. This story also appears in this hardcover volume for the very first time. It was called Time to Come, and Derleth, Ferreira, Strauss, and Young. Unfortunately, I do not have the paper sleeve for it, which apparently is not very interesting. I've seen pictures of it. You can probably look it up on eBay for Time to Come. It looks like pieces of red torn away, and there's the title and maybe some of the little information of the book. I don't know what the back looks like. But at any rate, the contents are everything that we would expect here. August Derleth has edited a number of collections of short stories and written a number of books. So here we go here. Edited by August Derleth, Time to Come, Science Fiction Stories of Tomorrow, Ferreira, Strauss and Young, New York. Okay, so that's what we have here. Copyright 1954, which is the first printing here at least, so at least the volume. So, what is tomorrow's world? Tomorrow's world is around the corner, just ahead. Perhaps it will be a world of atomic war or interplanetary travel. It may be one of progress, or, if war is to be our lot, of retrogression. But whatever it is to be, tomorrow offers a boundless field for unlimited speculation, especially to that dweller in fanciful future time, the writer of science fiction. Was it not, after all, the vision of science fiction writers of almost half a century ago which foresaw the industrialized and highly mechanized world of today? And so on. So, and we have a story in here. It's called The Pause by Isaac Asimov. These are all the stories are tomorrow. Point is that these stories are being published for the very time. There we go. These 12 stories in this book were written for this book and have been published nowhere else. They represent 12 different visions of the world of the future. They range from events which are within the possibilities of the decade to such far-flung potential history of the universe. So, let's see, what does it say? Asimov. Well, apparently it's only just sampling of some of them. And Asimov's wasn't one of the more interesting stories, I guess. At least as seen by August Derleth. Well, what is The Pause? Let's get to it. I compared the text against that as against the way it appears in By Jupiter. I've already recounted how this was, Asimov was beginning to react against writing for book anthologies any longer, but he had written for that one, and I guess that it was kind of coincidence he kind of didn't do that for a while, and then in time it was like, I think it's a bad thing. But I've discussed that elsewhere, so I'm not going to repeat that here. That account is quoted in By Jupiter right before the actual text of The Pause in By Jupiter. So what happened? What is The Pause? The Pause is radioactivity suddenly just disappeared, and apparently, except for a very tiny handful of hand-picked individuals, even the very knowledge of it, it's one of those things where suddenly nobody ever knew. No, your own mother doesn't know that she had you as a child, and nobody knows you existed, or that sort of thing. So, kind of a Mandela effect writ large. In this case, you know that, hey, there was radioactivity, there were Geiger counters, there was pitch blende for finding uranium as a source of uranium ore. There was all these different things, and now suddenly nobody knows that, pitch blende. Well, that's just tar. What do we want that around here for? What's all this machinery here? These Geiger counters, what are they counting? Well, apparently nothing. There's nothing to count. No more radioactive particles. The mechanism was a little bit intriguing in how this was done. I think it would have been a little bit more cool, though, if all the usual radioisotopes, in fact, still existed. There's still carbon-14, there's still uranium and all as many isotopes, and cobalt, they mentioned cobalt, radioactive, they don't say which one, but it's one of the very dangerous ones. They call it hot, because you don't want to be near this stuff. It will radiate you and kill you or if you don't keep yourself very strictly isolated from it. At any rate, all of the isotopes would still exist. They just suddenly don't decay. They don't do anything atomic. In fact, there's nothing you can do to make them do. If there's any technetium suddenly, if there had been any technetium when this happened, that's what there would be. No more, no less. It'll stay that way, it'll be stable, but there's no way to create it. Like there had been, because you could, irradiate molybdenum with, I think, electrons and so forth, and it would somehow either electrons or alpha particles. I think it was electrons, but anyway, none of that is possible. But at the same time, everything just goes stable. But no, instead, the unstable isotopes one and all disappear. Apparently, they didn't realize that bismuth doesn't really have a stable isotope. All it really has is this one isotope that we use has a half-life that's literally in the mega trillions of years or something. It does decay, but it's so fantastically slow that the radiation from it is, for all intents and purposes, absolutely harmless within your own bodily system. So you can actually take bismuth, like say stomach medicine, and it's not going to hurt you. I mean, it's not even as much as the radiation of the potassium that you'd find in a routine banana. So and there's another one. Potassium is a useful, element in human physiology to a small degree, and that too apparently becomes radioactive, but it would just somehow not be. So you really couldn't take away all the radioactive isotopes, or at least all the ones that are more radioactive than some threshold, I guess is what you could say. Would have made more sense to just let whatever exists, but it's not radioactive. It's not decaying. It won't fish. It won't fuse. Well, we have to allow an exception for the sun. Okay. So it's like, what are the rules of this thing? Well, the first thing when this guy sees this happen is he's got some kind of a counter looking at samples, and suddenly there's no count, nothing. 0, 0, 0, it just comes to nothing. Because some mysterious arbitrary force has just switched off radioactivity. However that was done. Well, why is that done? Well, apparently he finally gets to meet up with somebody from that intelligence. Well, we're just doing this for 5 years. We want things to cool off. We don't mind that you know these things, but we want you to have a little time to be prepared for it better, I guess, culturally, scientifically, and so forth. And, not ready to blow yourselves or each other away with this kind of stuff. Because that was very much a concern. In fact, the immediate previous story, Let's Not, is kind of the same thing. I think that's actually written later. It was, we could blow ourselves up. We could give ourselves a nuclear, well, they didn't think about nuclear winter per se. I think they were more like just imagining, if one nuclear bomb could take out Hiroshima, how many would it take to efface the entire face of the earth? Probably less than we actually have. Well, actually, no, it'd be a lot more, but it could still seem that way. And certainly all the major cities could be eliminated. In point of fact, though that certainly leaves a tremendous amount of rural areas that would be mostly unaffected, other than by fallout and things like that, which would affect more of the world. And of course, now we know about things like nuclear winter. I'll refrain from commenting on that. So, once again, this is kind of post-World War II, post-atomic age fear, where suddenly we have this weapon of enormous potential for just vast amounts of destruction. And that was a very real concern. People started building bomb shelters in their backyards and things like that, just because of that. So it was a real concern. But anyway, that's kind of the story. And then what's going on? What kind of questions does this raise? Like, what are we to whatever mysterious intelligence is benignly deigned to intervene in our affairs? And why? And what does that mean about what we are? Are we like sheep who don't even know what we're being grown for? Well, that's enough. Thanks for listening.